Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Dave tipped me off to a story off of Reason.com, but out of New Jersey, and it's good news regarding the concept of civil asset forfeiture. We've talked about this before, about how the police, if they pull you over and they find money on you, they can just take your money and make you sue them to get your money back, even if they don't even bother accusing you of a crime. And civil asset forfeiture is possibly one of the worst things in America right now. It doesn't necessarily affect everyone, but when people hear about it, they're shocked. Like, wait, they can just take your money and you've got to sue them to get your money back? And by the way, if you win, you just get your money back. You don't get any more money. You have to pay your own attorney fees. And they never apologize. They say, oh, there you go. That's your money. Take it. So there are states now taking steps to do something about this. Some states have taken meaningful steps. Some states have taken symbolic steps, but it's really something that ought to be abolished. Unfortunately, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that there's nothing wrong with this. So that's crazy. A lot of people will say, hey, Steve, what about Timms versus Indiana? And I had several people say, Steve, Timms versus Indiana reversed civil asset forfeiture. It wasn't couched as a civil asset forfeiture case. Timms was couched as a fine, and they treated it as an excessive fine case. So I did an entire video on that, but that did not do away with civil asset forfeiture in any meaningful way. Now, this might, though, at least in New Jersey. New Jersey passes civil asset forfeiture reforms, and again, like I said, from Reason.com, Dave passed along the story. New Jersey took a couple big steps toward reforming law enforcement's use of civil asset forfeiture just the other day. The Democratic-controlled New Jersey Senate passed a bill Monday by a 36-3 vote. There's always three holdouts. Requiring a criminal conviction in certain cases before police and prosecutors can take property using civil forfeiture. And that to me that's the easiest way to do this, is just say, look, if you convict somebody, you then ask the jury, do they get to keep the money or not? But if there's no conviction, and especially if there's no charges filed, you can't take the money from somebody. That's how it ought to be. That same day, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed a transparency bill into law that will require quarterly reporting by police departments detailing how much money they've received recently in forfeiture activities. He said this is a huge step forward for transparency and accountability. New Jersey law enforcement agencies currently have no permanent statutory requirement to disclose civil asset forfeitures. And again, a lot of people have covered this. Stephen Colbert's talked about it. John Oliver's talked about it. In one of the John Oliver pieces, I recall, there was a police department down south that would take the money and spend it on stuff, and they started running out of stuff to spend the money on because they had so much money that at one point they bought frozen daiquiri machines. Seriously. So, New Jersey law enforcement agencies currently have no permanent statutory requirement to disclose civil asset forfeitures, Murphy said. The legislation would boost confidence in our justice system by requiring county prosecutors to track and report that data to us. Jennifer McDonald, a research analyst at the Institute for Justice, called the new transparency requirements fantastic. But just because they report it doesn't mean it's going to end. This bill not only codified existing practices, but also drastically improved as what they were doing in the past, she says. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie vetoed a similar transparency bill in 2017. And a lot of people, for some odd reason, don't understand that this is often politics. And a lot of people have told me that, the Republicans do this, or Democrats do this, and they often get these things backwards because Governor Chris Christie often has the capital R following his name, and he's the one who vetoed this transparency bill when it was in front of him a couple years ago. A 2018 report by the ACLU of New Jersey found that there were almost no transparency requirements surrounding civil asset forfeiture there. And that the practice usually affects minorities more than others. The new requirements will create an online database showing the public what police have seized, the value of the item, the exact location of the seizure, whether the forfeiture case was settled, and the ultimate fate of what the property ended up as. Civil asset forfeiture laws were intended to allow police and prosecutors to target the illicit proceeds of organized crime, and law enforcement groups say they are a vital tool to disrupt drug trafficking. But that's actually not true. Civil asset forfeiture predates the war on drugs. Civil asset forfeiture actually goes way, way back. Actually back to colonial days. There were cases, and in law school you read these wacky cases that are entitled things like, in the matter of the 69 barrels of rum. And what happens is a ship comes into port with a contraband on board, and the customs officials board the ship. And while they're discovering the contraband, the people on the ship take off. and disappear. So now the government's got this contraband. What do they do with it? So back then, they'd actually file an action. And since there's no person to file the action against, they file it against the thing itself. Okay? And so that makes sense in that context. But when they pull you over for driving down the road and they say, yeah, your tail light was out, and then they discover that you got $10,000 in cash in your pocket and they take it from you, and then they go sue us to get it back, that's a far cry from the contraband on board the galleon that pulled into the harbor of the colony back in the 1600s. Okay? So times have changed. Civil liberties groups say there are too few procedural protections for innocent property owners who bear the burden of going to civil court to challenge a seizure, and too many perverse profit incentives for police departments and prosecutors whose budgets are often padded by this. And that's the problem. Two things. They don't have to prove that the money's ill-gotten. You have to prove that it's not, which reverses the standard of proof that most people understand in America. I'm innocent until proven guilty, but my money is guilty until proven innocent, which makes no sense at all. And number two, the profit motive. They are incentivized to take your money and keep it because they get to keep it. They take your money and they can spend it on stuff like daiquiri machines. Okay? So if they weren't allowed to keep what they were taking, they'd probably take a little less. But if it's actually ill-gotten gains, shouldn't they be taking it? And so it's obviously not working the way it was intended, like I said, from 400 years ago. A few states like New Mexico, North Carolina, and Nebraska have essentially abolished civil asset forfeiture by requiring a criminal conviction before property can be forfeited, which is the way to do it. Others have passed laws funneling forfeiture revenues into general funds, which takes away the profit motive. The bill passed by the New Jersey Senate on Monday will require a criminal conviction in forfeiture cases involving under $1,000 in cash or $10,000 in property. What about if it's more than that? Why draw that distinction? McDonald said the bill was a modest improvement, but it still allows civil forfeiture to go on, and it doesn't even require a conviction for all property types. We want them to continue to push forward for ending civil forfeiture entirely and replacing it with criminal forfeiture, which makes more sense. The legislation now goes to the desk of Murphy, who will decide whether to sign it into law. So the small cases, $1,000 and less in cash, or $10,000 in property, yeah, they got to get a conviction. But if they pull you over and you got $1,001 on you, they can just take it from you. Just say, ill-gotten. Who in their right mind carries $1,001 in cash? Are you crazy? Are you going to buy a car? Which is actually the most common situation that I've heard of from people who watch my channel, who say, Steve, I often buy cars. And many people who are selling cars won't take certified funds, checks, gift cards, sacks of turnips. No, they actually want money. They want cash. They want U.S. currency. And so if you're going to buy a car that costs more than $1,000 in New Jersey, you run the risk of being pulled over by a cop who says, oh, you're obviously a criminal. These are obviously criminal proceeds. We can keep these. And even with this new law, they can keep it and you got to sue them to get your money back. So it's a strange law that most people, until they've heard of it, would go, that's impossible. Doesn't even make any sense. No, it's possible. It's been going on for some time now. And like I said, and like Reason points out, three states have said, if you want to keep the money, you got to get a conviction. And that's such a common sense thing that most people hear that go, why don't they do that? Why don't they do that? Seems like that's the most logical way of doing it. And there's a reason they don't do that. Because they like the money. Anytime the government has figured out a spigot that they can open up and money pours out of it, trying to get them to agree to close that spigot, it's almost impossible. Because sadly, our government gets addicted to money. And it is addicted to money. And it's addicted to that cash flow. And they spend it as fast as it comes in. And as you know, they spend it faster. They spend it faster. For every dollar that comes in, they spend $1.10. But when more money comes in, they don't go, oh, now we can just spend within our means. No, they spend more. So they get this much, they spend this much. The second they get to this much money, they spend this much. And it's going to do that forever. And the problem is that a big chunk of the money they're getting now, especially the police departments, for instance, is from civil asset forfeiture. And I've actually seen police chiefs who've said, if you cut that money off, we won't be able to operate. Well, you mean to tell me you have to have this goofy, immoral source of cash flow to keep your department running? Go talk to the government and say, hey, look, we're not getting the proper money to run our department over here. Make the case to them. Don't steal it from the people you're trying to protect. So New Jersey's taken a small step in the right direction. A couple other states have taken the correct steps. But last time I counted, there were approximately 50 states, give or take. 45 or 46 other states need to wake up and do something about this. And by the way, I've had people say, Steve, what are you doing about it? I'm making videos. I'm educating people. What are you doing about it? Okay? You should talk to people. Tell people about this. Make sure people understand this. And if you ever have the opportunity to talk to a congressperson or a legislator in your state, whatever you call them, an assembly person, some states, if you ever have the opportunity to talk to one of them, heaven forbid one stands on your porch and asks you to vote. I've actually had that happen before. And you know what's funny is I know people who say, Steve, as the elections approach, these people come and they knock on my door and it drives me crazy during election season. People show up and talk to me. They want to talk to me. People who show up on my porch to talk to me are usually very, very sorry they did. Because if they're here talking religion, I'll debate them. And if they're here talking politics, I'll explain to them what's wrong in Lansing or what's wrong in Washington. And if they're the incumbent, they're part of the problem. And if they're going there, they better promise me they'll do what I'm asking them to do. And if they don't, I'll explain to them how quickly they can get off my porch. So there you have it. But civil asset forfeiture is something you need to be aware of. We all need to work on this. Questions, comments, put them below. Otherwise, talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Be happy in the moment. That is enough. Each moment is all we need, not more.